Good morning. Good Chodesh. Today is the first day of the new month of Iyar. It's called Rosh Chodesh. Things should be very good. Things should be healthy for everyone. Everyone should be safe. Everyone should have happiness. Everything that they need. We ask Hashem to give it to us today for the coming month, for the whole month. This month actually has 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, 2 days of these new days, new months, if you will, beginning of the month. It's today and tomorrow. So I extend my wishes for a very good month in all manners for each and every one of you. I want to share with you a story that took with it 12,000 people. And the story takes place in a place called Pumbedisa. It was a yeshiva, and the head of that yeshiva was a great sage by the name of Rabba Bar Nachmani. And this great sage, Rabba, had a custom, it's actually Jewish law, that before every holiday, people gather and they review the laws, the traditions, the customs that are associated with the coming holiday. Now, it so happened that when this Rabbah would give his classes, his talks about the upcoming holidays, you had 12,000 people there. And then during that time, when 12,000 people were gathered, the tax collector decided to come and try to pick up his taxes, get to enforce whatever was due to the government. But they came by and nobody was home because thousands of people were at the shul or the study hall listening to all of the laws and customs that are associated with the upcoming holiday. So they got very upset at him, and they said that you are holding back, it's in your control, you're stopping the government's income. You're messing around with the wrong people. And as a result, he had to flee. So the Gemara, the Talmud, relates the story, how he ran away, and the authorities are searching for him. At some point, he ran to a spot next to a river, a creek, and he sat down on a branch, and he figured, I'm going to now study Torah. And he sat down to study. Again, this was a great sage, running away for his life, for a crime that he did not commit, and he's sitting down, starting to study Torah. At that very moment, when he's sitting at the creek studying Torah, a Chodesh Tov Ken, and by the way, if anyone watching online, you feel free to ask questions. Share the video, of course, like it if you do, and subscribe. But if you want to ask questions in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on Facebook, I will be happy to address them. So the sage is sitting by this stream of water, finally catching his breath, and he's learning a little bit. At that very moment, in heaven, yes, in heaven, there was also learning. Now, we don't often talk about it, but there's a whole world going on up there. We should never be there anytime soon. But the higher worlds, in the heavenly courts, there's also a yeshiva, and people study. The souls, after they leave this world, they go to the heavenly court, and they study Torah there. Angels, souls, there's a lot going on. So at that very moment, there was a discussion in the heavenly yeshiva. It's actually called the Beis Din, the high court, the court of heaven, regarding the laws of tzaras. And I want to take a moment to just give you a little background. What's this tzaras? It's loosely or erroneously, it's translated as leprosy. Well, leprosy is not the correct translation. It's not the definition of what tzaras is. Tzaras is a skin condition. The closest way to describe it is leprosy, but it's not exactly the medical leprosy or that type of thing that may exist today. Back in the day, biblical times, and it continued well into the temple times, if somebody spoke negative about another person, okay, you had a good piece of gossip to share with somebody, and you told your friend that Mr. X or Miss X did whatever. That negative thing that you said is obviously a sin. It's wrong. It's wrong for the person that says it. It's wrong for the person that listens to it. And frankly, it also damages the one that it's about. But regardless if it's true or if it's not true, if you spoke negative about someone else, then you would get a condition on your skin. Now, this condition has three manners how it could appear. It could be on a person's home. He notices some kind of discoloration on his wall. It's not a leak. It's not dirt. His kids weren't home from school and coloring on the walls. It was a complete something spiritual, something out of the ordinary that just appeared. And depending on the color, depending on the size, depending on the progress of that spot on your wall, it would be determined if this is considered tsaras and therefore impure, or it's some other kind of stain and there's nothing to worry about. If it was indeed impure, then they quarantine the person or the item for 7 days, and they watch it. What happens further? Did it not wash, but they inspect it? What happens further? Did it get worse? Did it get bigger? Did the color change? And during this process, you could ascertain, is this indeed tsaras or not? And by the way, if it was a house that had tsaras, the house gets knocked down. There's another option. It could be on a person's clothing. You notice some kind of stain on your sweater, on your shirt. And again, depending on the color, depending on the size, depending on the progression, it would be determined if this is tsaras or not. But the third one, and the most extreme one, is if you found the condition on your skin. You're looking at your hand and you notice something is off. There's a color, there's a spot. What is that? And it depends what color it is, how white is it. There could be hair inside the spot, which is white, but the spot is not white. Okay, that's the background of this discussion, which obviously is this week's parsha. This week's Torah portion discusses this at length. But at that very moment, when Rabbi Bar Nachmani was sitting at the creek studying Torah, in heaven there was also a discussion in the heavenly court. And the discussion was more of a debate, an argument, regarding the two symbols, the two indicators of tsaras. If the skin portion, the person's skin turned white, and the hair, the black hair that was on that skin also turned white. So the halacha, the law here is very interesting. If the skin turned white first, and then the hair turned white, the person is impure. However, if the hair first turned white and then his skin turned white, then he's pure. Okay? So if your skin goes first, changes discoloration, and then your hair, you're impure. But if your hair goes first and then your skin goes, you're ritually pure. Okay? Don't worry if you don't exactly get it. These laws of purity and impurity, it's one of the categories of Torah which are very difficult to understand. They are not logic. Okay, it's not something ritually pure, spiritually clean is not something which you could understand, nor can I, or anybody for that matter. It's not a logical thing. There's a science to it, a mechanism of how it works, but it's not a spiritual. It's not something which we could explain why something is impure or not pure. It's like, for example, kosher. What's wrong with a pig? Why is a pig bad? Okay, don't tell me healthy, because there's so many kosher delicatessen which are probably not so healthy. But it's stuff which is hard to understand. We can't really explain it or rationalize it. But the question, the halacha is that if the hair gets white first and the person is pure, and then the skin goes. If the skin gets white and then the hair goes, then he's impure. Okay, these are the laws. Now, the discussion in the heavenly court in Shemayim was what happens in a case of an uncertainty. It's a suffix. I'm not sure. Did the hair get white first and then I am pure? Or did my skin become white first and then I'm impure? There's a debate. We know the halacha when you're sure, if your skin got white first and then your hair, then you are tamei. But if your hair got white first and then your skin, then you're pure. But I don't know which one was first. What happens then? So get this. There was an argument in heaven between Hashem, between God, and the Beis Din Shel Ma'ala, the High Court. Now, I'll explain a little bit what this means. You can't argue with God. But Hashem was of the opinion. Again, it sounds funny to say opinion about Hashem, but we're going to clarify that. Hashem said, the Holy One, blessed be He, said that in a case when someone is uncertain what turned white first, the hair or the skin, that he's going to be tahor, he's pure. If, however, the Beis Din, the court in the heaven, they said, no, he's impure. How do you decide what to do? We need to resolve this. Okay, they're studying. God said one thing. The High Court says another thing. How do we resolve it? They decided we're going to give this decision to that sage who just ran away, who was being pursued by these authorities that wanted to kill him. He's sitting at the creek studying Torah. We're going to let him make that decision. And in order to do that, we have to bring him to heaven, which means death. So they sent the angel of death, the Malach HaMaves, they sent him to earth, and they said, bring him back. Basically, take his life. Now he gets to the creek, and the angel of death is standing there, and he sees the sage studying. Now, the rule is that while you study Torah, it's not possible to die. It's one of the rules. At the moment that you are studying, you can't go. So the angel of death was not able to get him. So in order to change things a little bit and to do his, whatever he wanted to accomplish, unfortunately, a noise, a commotion was made. For a moment, Rabbi Bar Nachmani, the sage, thought that maybe the authorities found where I am, they're getting closer, they're chasing me. So he stopped studying, he started to figure out what he should do. At that moment, he got him. And as Rabbah was passing away, he was still alive, but he was dying, he said, Tahor, in the case where it's not sure if the skin turned white first or the hair turned white first, we're going to go with God's opinion, and which is that the person is going to be pure, ritually pure. It's a non-issue. Okay. Just to clarify or to share, he didn't die because he stopped learning. Whatever it was, it's time to go. But at that moment, while he's learning, it's not possible to take him. There are other cases like this, King David, that while he was learning, it wasn't possible to take him because he was learning. There are people that study the entire time, and the angel has a hard time taking them. I'm going to take a quick coffee. So, actually drinking less coffee during this whole quarantine situation. I don't know if they say some people are eating more, drinking more, changing their habits, but at least I'm not having that much coffee, though it's a double size. In any case, so here you have the head of the yeshiva of Pumbedisa. He just died. And he's somewhere in the wilderness. He's running away. Who's going to find him? Who's going to bury him? Who's going to take care of him? So from heaven, they gave a heavenly message. Let's call it a prophecy to the yeshiva of Pumbedisa that their teacher has passed away. The head of the yeshiva passed away. Now, he ran away, so they don't know where he is. So they started to search, and they came to that stream, that creek, and they saw a group of birds that were creating a shadow at a certain spot. And they figured out, the Talmud says, they figured out that must be where he is. And indeed, they were able to give him the proper respect and take care of what he needed. Okay, but let's understand this crazy story. I say crazy, not because it's not in a literal sense, but it's something which requires lots of explanation. There's an argument in heaven. God said this. How do you argue with God? How is it even a discussion? Just ask Hashem what is your Ken? Thank you. What is your opinion? Hashem says something. That's what it is. What do you mean? Hashem should just tell us the law. Why is there even a discussion? Okay. So first of all, how is there even a debate in the heavenly court? And to the extent that even when Hashem tells them what to do, they don't have an answer. Okay? You have to wait till someone on earth, a human, tzaddik, but a human is going to decide what happens. It's a very interesting thing. And the answer to this question lies in another story, also from the Talmud. There's a certain oven called the oven of Achnai. The oven of Achnai, I'm not going to get into the details of how this oven is constructed, because I'm unsure myself. But the oven is such an oven that there's a question if it's pure or impure. Now, certain materials cannot become impure. If it's part of the ground, if it's attached to the ground, how it's constructed, not in any case could any material become impure. Impure would mean if it was in the same room as someone who passed away, or someone that had saras was there. There's many ways that something could become impure. But in this context of this oven, we say that it's a question. Is it? There's actually an argument among the sages. Is a Achnai oven pure or impure? Now, there was a very great sage, you may have heard of him, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, he insisted that the Achnai oven is pure. Our sages, meaning the majority rule of the yeshiva, they argued with him and they said, no, it's impure. So you have this discussion. You're sitting in a yeshiva somewhere, this is not in heaven, this is very much down on earth. And there's a yeshiva, and there's a discussion, a halachic dispute. One opinion says the oven is, I'm going to call it kosher, but it's pure. One says it's kosher, and the majority of the sages that are sitting there, they say it's not kosher. Okay. And they have an argument, and each one is proving, again, an argument in a good way. They want to make sure that the halacha, the law, is done correctly. They're arguing among themselves what's the right way, what's the wrong way, and they're trying to prove it. Now, Rabbi Eliezer was trying to prove his point through some wondrous or miraculous supernatural things. What he did was he caused that all of a sudden a boxer tree was uprooted from its place. They're sitting and talking, and Rabbi Eliezer says, watch that. And the boxer, the carob tree, gets uprooted. Which basically shows, listen, I'm not just some guy. And what I'm telling you is true. Look what just happened, something supernatural. Didn't work. The sages did not concede and say, fine, that oven will be allowed. Or you're correct in your opinion. So then he pointed to a stream, and the stream started to flow the opposite way. The current was going one way, and all of a sudden it goes the other way. And again, it's a miraculous feat. So clearly, you're doing something here which is supernatural. You're right with what you're saying. It didn't work. The sages would not agree with Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. They say it's impure, it's unfit for use, and he says it's kosher. So then the walls of the yeshiva where they were studying, the study hall, started to cave in. Literally, the wall was falling. And then it just stopped midair. Now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the wall is caved. And still, the argument remains. Our sages say a Achnai oven is impure, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, the great sage, says it is pure, it's kosher, fine to use. They're not resolving this. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus says, if the halacha is like me, let heaven prove it. He just finished those words, and a heavenly voice comes out and says, the halacha, the law is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Imagine, you're having a debate with a friend or with the group. Everyone else says one thing, you say the other thing. And to prove your point, a heavenly voice comes out and says, you're right. How many arguments are going on now about politics and other things, about how to deal with the virus and how to deal with the economy and all these other things? And the heavenly voice will come out and say, you're right or you're wrong. Now, there is a principle that majority rules. It's actually a Torah principle. It's a biblical principle. When the high court, any court, is debating, the reason why you have 3 rabbis on a Jewish court, then it goes to 23 or 71, But you always have an odd amount is because you have to have majority. And when there's a dispute, majority has to rule. It's interesting that if the discussion is about life or death, for example, somebody is convicted of killing someone, and we're not sure if he's innocent or guilty based on certain evidence, based on certain things. So if the entire court says he's guilty, we don't kill him. You have to have at least one person that disputes it. Because when one person disputes it, it creates discussion, it creates the need to try to prove, disprove, and he gets a fair trial. But if everyone is of the same opinion that this person is guilty by death penalty, then we don't administer it. Something is wrong. But the point I want to bring out here is that the Jewish justice system is such that majority rules. Okay? It doesn't matter. You could be the greatest sage in the world. If you're having a discussion with the other sages and majority disagrees with you, you are going to be outvoted. That's just what it is. Okay. So in our context, they're having a discussion about an oven, an argument, and the sages, plural, which means the majority of the yeshiva, argues and says it's impure, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus could try any trick he wants, any miraculous move. Trees are being uprooted, rivers are going the other way, walls are caving, doesn't matter. The law is the law, majority rules, and you can't use any spiritual powers to disprove it. Even the heavenly voice, God, a voice comes out from heaven and says, the law is like him. The sages got up and they said, hold it. Torah is not in heaven. Okay, Torah is here. And when there's a dispute, it has to be resolved here. It is not to be resolved in heaven. Now, what does that mean? Before Moshe passed away, before Moses passed away, he was 120 years old when he passed. Died on his birthday. And he passed away on his birthday. He was speaking to the Jewish people for weeks before, imploring them to stick to the Torah ways, not to worship idols, which was a very, very strong temptation in those times. You're going to go into Israel, things are going to change. You're not going to be living the desert life. You're going to enjoy certain freedoms, but you're also going to have certain responsibilities, and those stresses and pressures of life are going to impact you in a certain way. He was talking to them, and one of the things that he says is Torah is not in heaven, which means it's not abstract, it's not distant, it's doable. You could do what Torah says right where you are. And we learn from those words, Torah is not in heaven, that Torah is not in heaven. You can't, is this kosher or not kosher? Well, let me go to sleep and maybe there'll be a note that'll pop from heaven. It doesn't work that way. A heavenly voice could come out tomorrow and say pork is kosher. It's not going to become kosher. Okay? Pork is not kosher, and Torah is down here in this world. So when you have an argument between the sages and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, and Rabbi Eliezer says it's impure, it's pure, and he's bringing all different proofs, supernatural, it doesn't work that way. Majority is majority. That's the principle. That's how the court rules. Nobody has the power to override that. Okay, so it was not resolved. It actually remained of the opinion of our sages, majority, that it was going to be impure. Now, the Gemara relates that Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, he was a man named Pinchas. When he passed away, his body went to heaven, and he came back, he turned into an angel, Elijah the prophet. He later was an angel, a prophet for the Jewish people. Many, many interesting stories about him. We know that he comes to every Seder, and he participates. He had a special cup for Elijah the prophet. We have special at every bris, we have a chair for him because he comes to every bris. It's a very unique personality, a special angel, and a kind angel. He's always helping, and so on. He came to the sages, and he told them that when that discussion happened between you and Rabbi Eliezer, and the heavenly voice came out and disproved you, said that he's right, and you said no, Torah is not in heaven, at that very moment God smiled. God doesn't have a body, doesn't smile. It's an expression that means Hashem was happy. And he said, Nitzchuni bonai nitzchuni, which means, my children, you have defeated me, you have won me over. In other words, you're right, you got me. Okay, let's call it a spooky story. Different, not something which we expect to normally read about or normally learn about. Heaven, an argument with God, and they ask the person, the sage down here, and he passes away. Then what's this whole idea of arguing with God? So we now understand why in heaven they needed to ask Rabba Bar Nachmani down there by the creek to ask him what his opinion is. He was going to resolve it because it has to be done on earth. In heaven, you don't resolve Jewish law. Torah was given, and the formula has to work based on the Torah. I want to give you a very common example. A microphone. Are you allowed to use a microphone on Shabbos? Okay, anyone want to share the opinion on mine? Now, the answer is no. It's electric and you can't use it. But when it first came out, there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of misunderstanding. Why? Because I'm not turning it on Shabbos. I can leave it on before Shabbos. And then I'm just going to speak. And I'll speak in the microphone, and it'll project the voice. Right? It's not projecting; it's going to electrify it and make it louder. But the concept here is that using a microphone is a new phenomenon. Moshe did not have that issue in the desert, right? They didn't have microphones. Or today with Zoom, are you allowed to use Zoom on Shabbos, on Yom Tov? Can I have Shabbos services on Zoom? So the question is, what's Zoom? How does it work? What's when you speak or when you appear, when you're doing something on it, what happens in that process? And if it falls into certain criteria, which it does, then it's unfit for use on Shabbos. It would be prohibited, just like lighting a candle, driving a car, whatever. But let's assume that you and I were debating this, if you're allowed to have the Zoom on Shabbos. And the heavenly voice came out and said, you are. It wouldn't work. Because there's a formula. And the formula, you have to know it. You have to know the laws and the layers and exactly how it works. But if you know those laws, then that's the answer. You could or you can't. Okay? Torah is not in heaven. Torah is on earth. And humans have to figure it out based on timeless principles, based on rules that are accessible to everybody. There's no power here. Nobody has any extra in, right? You have to be learned if you know what you're talking about, but you have to always back it up. So in heaven, they're discussing a case. If the skin got white first or the hair got white first, but you're not sure which one came first, if you're not sure, there's a debate. Come to heaven, down to earth. It happens to be, he said, it's pure, like Hashem did. And that was the deal. So that part we understand why it has to come to earth, because that's the way Torah operates. But what's this concept? You argued with God. Hashem said pure. The heavenly court said no. What's this all about? Okay. Even in heaven, you could have your opinion, but the moment that Hashem tells you what it is, your opinion's gone. God just said it. Okay? So in order to understand this, I want to share with you 6 concepts. Okay? To understand what's God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. It's an expression for God, a term. God. Number 2 is the heavenly court. What is that? What does that represent? The white of the skin, which we discussed about heaven, about Saras. White hair, purity and impurity. Okay, these 6 things. God, heavenly court, skin, hair, pure and impure. Each one of these things represent a different level of spirituality. When we say the Holy One, what's holy? Holy means it's separate, it's aloof, it's different, it's away, it's not in the norm. Okay? So when we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem, it means that God is removed, so to speak, from this world. Hashem's impact, Hashem's energy on this world is in a very, it's called in Kabbalah, it's called makif. It surrounds. It doesn't get into the details. It's not internalizing. It's just shooting the projection. Okay? Give an example of that. In your body, you're alive, thank God, for many, many happy, healthy years. You have a soul. It gives you physical energy. Okay, you're alive. The difference between a body that's alive or not alive is that energy. Now, it's a very general energy. Your toe has the same energy as your eye. It's alive. But then there's a more detailed, more specific life force that's coming from your soul. And that goes to every single limb of your body, specific to what it needs. Okay? Your eye needs to see. Your finger has to feel. It requires a different type of power. So the first type of power that just makes you alive is equal everywhere. It's a very aloof type of life. It's just there. Whatever you do with it, you do with it. The second part is very specific. It goes into the details. It makes you see. It makes you hear. It allows you to smell all these other pieces. So Hashem, when we use the word God, or the Holy One, blessed be He, it's referring to a level where Hashem is separate from this world. He's removed. Obviously, He's involved. Obviously, He's making it exist. But it expresses a level where Hashem is not intimately involved with every single detail that goes on. I can't stress enough. He is intimately involved. But when we use that term, it's talking about a spiritual energy which is distant. Beis Din, the Jewish court, the high court in heaven, that represents a level that's very involved with this world. Okay? That's the part that's into the nitty-gritty, the details of life. So the first term, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, that's the level where God or heavenly energy is not into the details. It's just there. When we use the word Beis Din, that's talking about how it's part of reality, how it's getting into the details, etc. What does Baheres, skin condition, what does it represent? Skin, hair, what does it mean? Skin and hair represent internal versus external. Okay? The hair of a person is external. You could cut hair, it's not the end of the world, right? It'll grow back, it doesn't hurt when you cut it for the most part, you're fine. It's external to you. The skin is internal, right? You don't take off the skin, it's part of you. And if you do, it's going to hurt. It's not an external thing that's separate from you. It's very much attached to you, very much part of you. So when a person has a stain, they have something on their skin, we need to know, is this internal or external? Is this an outside factor which is causing me to behave this way, but it's not really me? Or is it really me? It's the internal, and now it's playing itself out on the external. So if it starts from my skin, that means it's internal. And then it moves to the hair, which is external. I'm impure. But if it starts from the hair, which is external, and then it gets to my skin, which is internal, now it's a different story. Now that means that it's externally only, and it came to internal. So I don't have to worry about it. It's not a sign of impurity. I have to fix it. But it's not going to make me tameh. It's not going to make me impure like tsaras. Purity and impurity represent humility versus arrogance. Okay? It's all about self, or it's about the other. Selfish versus selfless. Me versus you. Inward versus outward. The whole idea of purity and impurity, that's what they represent. Is it about me or about you? Is it humility or arrogance? In Hebrew, the word bittul, which means nullification or humility, has the same root word, same letters of the root word, tevilah, which is to immerse, which is part of the purification process. don't want to get too complicated here. The point is that purity and impurity, pure is the concept of humility and selflessness. And impure is the process or the concept of arrogance and self, ego, etc. Okay? Now we can understand what's the debate in the heavenly court if you're not sure what came first. I don't know what came first. Did my skin come first, which would be an internal problem, and therefore I'm impure? Or did the hair change colors first, and it's an external problem, which is not such an issue? And we're not sure. So Hashem says it's pure. Why? Because the level we said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, means he's somewhat separate from the reality. God is not separate, but in this expression, he's separate from the reality. And therefore, he decides things based on beyond the reality. It's not decided based on what came first or what came second. As long as you can't prove that the person was impure, then he's pure. And because there's a doubt what came first, we're not going to prove it. There's no proof. The Beis Din Shalmaila, the High Court, they're coming from a totally different angle. They're saying that no, a judge could only say and only issue verdicts based on what he sees. Okay? Based on what I see, I can't tell you I heard. Someone told somebody. If you don't see it, you can't, or have witnesses testifying, you can't judge. It's another principle when it comes to judgment of Jewish judges. Okay, so therefore they come down to the world and they ask Rabbi Bar Nachmani, "What do you say?" Okay, so they say the heavenly court says you're impure because what we see here is the impure signs. What came first? What came second? I know what I see. So you send it down to the heavenly world, to the worldly, the physical world, and you ask a sage over there. So just to summarize this before we go on, I just want to share a story that's really going to bring this out. But the summary here is, by the way, this is from a discourse of the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, on this week's Parsha in a book called Likutei Torah. Fascinating work. But the idea here is that when you say Hashem was of the opinion, it's talking about the spiritual energy which is removed from the world. It doesn't get into the details. I can't prove impure, we're making you pure. The Beis Din, which counters that, that's talking about a level of spiritual energy which says, no, I'm looking at it now at what I see in front of me. They go down to the world and they tell the human being, Rabbi Bar Nachmani, you decide. And he said it was tahar, it's pure. I want to share with you a story that brings out that Torah is not in heaven, Torah is down here. And I shared the story yesterday with my kids. So if you watch the bedtime story section on YouTube or on Facebook, you would have heard the story. But I'm going to share it here because I think it's very relevant. It really brings out this point. There was a Rebbe by the name of the Tzemach Tzedek. He was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's the one that said, Tracht gut wird sein gut, think good, it'll be good. Something which we really need to do these days. Get on that train, as they say, the positivity train. He once sat with his Hasidim, with his disciples, and he asked them, what do you want to hear? A Dvar Torah, a Torah thought, or a story? Now, usually the Rebbe says what he wants to say. He doesn't ask them for choices. And definitely, it was an unusual request, a story. It's not often that he would share stories. So they understood that you got to go for the story. They said, Rebbe, we want to hear the story. So he tells them, some time ago, there was a Jewish landlord who rented out one of his properties to another Jewish family. Okay? And this Jewish family came the end of the month, they had to pay the rent, they didn't pay it. So the Jewish landlord goes to the Jewish client, and knocks on the door and says, could I have my rent? And they said, well, sorry, we don't have it yet. Okay, he came back the next month, 2 months rent. We don't have it. So comes back again. After the third month, he said, guys, if you don't pay, you, your wife, your kids, you can't live here. We're going to evict you. So the guy, the renter, ran to his Rebbe. His Rebbe was Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, the Heilige Ruzhiner. He ran to the Ruzhiner and he said, help me, my landlord wants to evict me. Could you do something? So he calls in the landlord, and the Ruzhiner tells, hi David, a good Erev Shabbos and a good Chedesh. He tells the landlord that, the Rebbe tells the landlord, this family, you're going to evict them on the streets. They have nowhere else to go. Obviously, they didn't pay you rent. They don't have the money. They can't rent any other place. Have some mercy. Have compassion. So the guy says, you know what? You're right. Rebbe, if you're asking me, I'll do it. And he goes to the renter and he says, I'm going to forgive the entire debt. Let's start fresh. I'll even lower the rent. But from now on, you got to pay on time. Thank you very much. They're overjoyed. They're starting fresh. The next month comes by. The landlord goes to the house to pick up the money, and no money. Comes back the next month and the next month. He says, listen, if you're not going to pay, I'm going to evict you. So he runs to his Rebbe, the Heilige Ruzhiner, and the Ruzhiner calls in this landlord, and he says, you're gonna kick out this family who is poor, and they're going to go into the streets, and where they're going to live, and this, come on, some compassion. Where's your heart? He says, you're right. He forgives the whole past debt, starting fresh, but you got to pay. The next month he comes, and he asks for the money, and there's no money. And he comes again and again. Again, he threatens to evict him, and a third time he goes to his Rebbe. And the Rebbe convinces him a third time. Okay. After the third time, when he forgives all the debts and he continues renting him the house, he doesn't evict him. He doesn't pay the first month, the second month. Then he says, I'm going to evict you. So he runs to his Rebbe. And the Rebbe calls in the landlord and he says, please don't kick out the guy. Don't let the family be on the street. And he says, Rebbe, no. I gave him one chance, a second chance. I forgave the debt one time. I forgave the debt the second time. It's already the third time. I cannot do this anymore. And he evicted. After 120 years or whatever this person passed away, he goes to heaven. And the angels, the prosecuting angels said, listen, you got to go get punished. What do you mean? I'm a good person. I lived my life. I helped people. I was whatever. You did everything you're supposed to do. He said, no, you evicted a family. They were on the streets. How could you? He says, guys, you're angels. You don't know what money is. You don't know what it means to have a business. You don't know what it means to rent out property. You're distant from this whole thing. You don't know what money is. You can't decide if I'm right or wrong. We need to call people that were actually on planet Earth, people that lived in that style. Let them decide. Okay? So they brought him two great tzaddikim. They brought the Beis Yosef, who wrote the Code of Jewish Law, and he brought the Bayis Chadash, which is Rabbi Yoel Sirkish, two great halachic authorities who have already passed away several hundred years before. And they told them, what do you say about this person? Is it correct? Is it not correct? And they said, you evicted a family in the streets? No, it's not acceptable. So he said, no. These fellows, these two great rabbis and great sages, they lived so many years before, it was several centuries before. They have forgotten what it's like. Put yourself in my situation. I have a property. I have expenses. Somebody is here and he's not paying. You're going to tell me that it's wrong. You're so removed. You haven't been on earth in hundreds of years. Let someone that's living now decide. So the Tzemach Tzedek is saying this story, and he turns to his people, to the disciples, the Hasidim there, and he says, I think he should be exonerated. I think he's innocent. What do you guys think? And the Hasidim, they realize that they're taking part of a heavenly judgment about this soul right now. And they said, yes, he's innocent. Yes, he should be exonerated. He should not be punished. He should be forgiven, etc. And that's what happened. But you see from here, firstly, that obviously you can't judge something in heaven. It has to come to this world. And it's just a beautiful example. We come to a tzaddik, we come to a rav, we come to a halachic authority in this world, and he decides. But the other thing is, and this is so important, is don't judge your fellow until you're in his shoes. We learn now Pirkei Avos, ethics of our fathers, and we learn it between Pesach and Shavuos, and it's talks about obviously ethics and Jewish values. And one of the things that we're going to learn this Shabbos is, it's in the second chapter, the fourth Mishnah, Al tadin es chavercha, do not judge your friend until you reach their place. Or how the expression goes in English, don't judge your friend until you walk a mile in his shoes. There are many ways to express this. But don't judge somebody until you're in their place. And this fellow was saying, you're going to tell me I'm wrong, but you didn't live my life. You don't know what it's like. So let's try to remember that. The Torah was given to us in this world to use. We should use it. We should apply it. We should recognize the special gift that we have. As we get ready for Shavuos, the Yontif, when we receive the Torah, we should not judge other people until we're in their place, until we're in their situation. It really means you don't get it. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt, understand where they're coming from. I'll conclude with my really best wishes for a good month, a happy month, a healthy month, and only very, very, very good and happiness for everyone. And if you like the video, please click like, share, subscribe. Have a good Shabbos.